This is the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Kendall of the notaballerina.com travel blog. Every episode I'll share travel tales from several fellow travel lovers, and together we hope to entertain and inspire you, remind you of some of your own great travel experiences, and encourage you to hit the road again soon. Hello and welcome to episode 74 of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. It's all about your first solo adventures. Now, as for me, I have not done masses of solo travel in my life. I definitely anticipate doing a lot more when I'm able to, although my son likes to travel with me at the moment, and that's okay too. And I have to admit that for many years, I didn't really want to travel solo. I was kind of, worried and anxious about the idea of travelling solo. I travelled in lots of different configurations, with family, with friends, with boyfriends and so on. But I can actually clearly remember what I kind of considered to be my first planned solo trip very vividly, in fact. It was just after my accidental first solo trip. And if you don't know about that, it was from the Zagreb bus station. And you can go right back to the preview episode of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast if you don't know it. I'll leave a link in the show notes. So anyway, back to my first planned solo trip. It was when I was living in Germany and I headed north to visit some friends in Kiel in the north. So visiting the friends wasn't exactly the solo part, but after that I had a few days on my own exploring Hamburg, which is a great city, by the way. And that was really the first time that I had properly travelled solo in a travel-y sense. I'd been away for work and stayed in hotels on my own and stuff like that, but it wasn't quite the same. So this was really what I feel like was the first time I was traveling somewhere, and I had that freedom to make all of the decisions myself. I could do exactly what I wanted when I wanted, and I really loved it, I have to say. I was still a bit nervous, I have to admit, but it was worth it. And that trip to Hamburg really taught me I could travel solo. I was perfectly capable. I didn't get too scared. It had so many benefits and good sides. And I realised I could do it again. And I have done it again, and I hope to do it more in the future. Not all the time. I think a good mix is just what I need, but sometimes solo travel is perfect. And my first guest today is Jo Castro, who, if you've listened to episodes previously with Jo, she's extremely well travelled. And I asked her about her first trip abroad, and it was a really interesting solo trip to Belgium when she was living in England. And I was, really keen to hear about Jo's first solo adventure.
My first trip abroad really was when I was 17, and at the time I had just done my O-levels in Devon, and I felt a very strong desire not to ever leave Devon in England, not to get on a plane or a ship ever, which looking back now is amazing because we've lived in so many different countries. Yeah. And as a nomadic life now, this seems very hard to believe that I was really rooted in Devon. And I'd done a lot of, we were quite a horsey family, and I did a lot of show jumping, and we'd always had ponies and horses. But when I left school, my dad stopped the horsey funding, as rightly he should. And he said, right, now you've got to go and do something, like you should either become a secretary or join the army, because he said I was bossy.
Oh, dear.
Neither of the two really appealed to me. And so I looked through the horsey magazine of the time, because horses, that was all I knew about and all I wanted to do. And the horsey magazine at the time was called Horse and Hound. And I looked down the classified ads and I saw a job as a groom in Belgium. And I didn't know anything about Belgium, but it said we're working with a show jumping family. So I thought, well, I know about that. I can do that. So I packed a rucksack, picked up my guitar and set off for Belgium on the ferry for a job with a show jumping family near Ostend.
Oh, my goodness.
And I waved the white cliffs of Dover goodbye with not a tear in my heart. This was it. This was, I was off now and expected great good fortune in my job. And of course I hated it. it. I didn't get to jump the horses. I was the groom. I was only allowed to muck them out and groom them. And instead of seeing the countryside from the cab or horseback box, I was stuck in the back tending to the horses when we travelled to shows. So I wrote miserable letters home, and I think of that song, Mudder Fada, here I am in Lake Nevada.
Yes, I know the one.
And when my mum and dad went on a driving holiday through France, they detoured to Belgium. And at the dead of night one night, they rescued me, muddy jogger boots, bad teenage attitude and everything. So that was that.
And they stole you away.
They stole me away, yes.
Oh, my goodness.
So that was my first trip abroad, yeah.
Oh, so that was a bit of a disaster as far as first trips abroad goes.
Yes, it was really, but it set the scene. From there I went to Jersey, and then I went to Gambia, and then I went back to England, then I went to Australia, and then Nepal, and that was hiking in Nepal and India. And then in between there, I'd met Dave, and then I went to Africa, and then it all started.
Yes.
So I never stopped travelling after that first trip to Belgium. Yeah.
But was there something about being away and seeing what limited parts of Belgium you could see that made you realise, yes, I do want to be away, or?
I think definitely I felt that I wanted to see more. So it spurred me into believing that there was a lot of the world that I would like to see, and I wasn't going to see it from the back of a horse box for sure.
Indeed.
It also gave me the confidence to know that I could. And I think when I never wanted to travel when I was in Devon, I didn't really believe that I could, or it was something that anyone would do or want to do, and that just gave me that very first taste, and I thought, oh, this is nice, and that sense of like freedom and being able to look after yourself and actually being able to I think it's the freedom, the actual freedom of it, because I never wanted to go back and live in Devon again.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? It's so funny you say that, because I often think, I sometimes meet people who say, they really don't like travelling and they never want to leave where they live, and I'm always really suspicious of them, and I think, how can you feel that way? Because, I feel the opposite. And I often wonder, is it just because they haven't taken that first step and had that experience that makes them change their mind? Like is there a traveller in everyone? People, there's people who prefer, more time at home than others, but are the ones who are so dead against it, it's just they haven't had that chance to develop that confidence and feel the freedom.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I don't know. And I don't know if you get past that, perhaps. I think as I get older now and definitely more set in my ways, I kind of like, I'm much more calculating about where we're going to go and what we're going to do, and what is going to be the outcome, what's the possible outcome, and how's it going to weigh up against my expectations. Whereas before it would be just, let's do that, that's great. And so I think there's two types. I think there are two types of people, and I think there are those that are quite happy being settled and creating, living in a community and being, probably pillars of that community and not moving away from it. So
yeah, that's true. I think you're right. Yeah, and it's interesting. I also, I guess it's a normal, you go through different phases, and certainly when I was in my 20s, I would just go anywhere without any plans or whatever, and certainly now, travelling with a child, it's much, much different, and I feel kind of compelled to keep him safe in a way that I never really cared so much about just for myself, but yes, definitely.
And I think that you become, when you have children, you become so then very much aware of their safety. I remember, Nepal changed everything for me with Sam as a baby. I very quickly, you become like the lioness, don't you?
Yeah,
and his safety was then paramount to me. And if I was up all night breastfeeding him, it didn't matter. I wasn't going to have a milk product and just in case dangerous. The water wasn't good enough. In case we hadn't filtered it right or whatever. You do. And then once they kind of grow up, that instinct of, is it safe, I think still remains with you. So
interesting.
Traveling before children, I think you are much more gung-ho, and then once you have children, I believe there's a different slant, and then once they leave home, you still sort of stained with that colour, that paint, it's still
yes.
you can't quite rub it off.
Yeah, I can imagine that happening, because even now if I travel alone, I travel in a different way, just being aware that, I mean, he's still youngish, but aware that I have a child, and so I don't want to do something crazy the way that in a different way. Yeah, I feel differently than when I was in my 20s. So, yeah.
Definitely. I understand that.
So Jo's first solo trip was an interesting one, and I love that her parents came to rescue her. And I'm amazed that she didn't even think she wanted to travel, that she was happy to stay in Devon forever. Knowing her now, and she's, lived and travelled through so many places around the world, it seems unthinkable that she ever had that attitude. So, but that first solo trip was an important one, I guess, to change her mind. So interesting stuff to me. All right, now my next guests today are Jo and Jeremy Duggan. They are travelling physiotherapists who I met at the Pro Blogger Conference in Melbourne a few months back. They have done all sorts of amazing travel, and they've both travelled on their own quite a few times in different capacities, travelling to volunteer and on longer trips as well. So I start out with Jeremy telling me about his first solo travel adventure.
I mean, my catalyst for solo travel or to leave my home city of Christchurch was we went through a couple of big earthquakes back in 2010 and 2011.
Yeah.
So I was always thinking about travel, and I'd done a little bit of travel, sort of more or less in groups and things like that in the lead up to it. But then obviously these big rattles of the earth came through and devastated the city.
Mm-hmm.
It was one of as I said, one of the reasons why I went across overseas. So I thought it'd be time to pull up stumps in New Zealand and head across to the UK. So
right.
As I mentioned earlier, I was going to go through the States, and I did that all by myself as well. So I was there for about 8 weeks.
And
I was really excited about going across there by myself. Sort of my first big trip overseas by myself. I think it's really important that you do experience solo travel. Gives you a lot of flexibility. It lets you, or gives you a sense of realization about yourself and how you can handle certain tasks and certain things which happen to you.
Yes, so true.
It's really good sort of going into hostels and meet new people, which can give you different avenues to continue your travel through as well. Like, for instance, I think there was one time in Miami that we're in a hostel. We'd signed up to this tour to go down to the Keys down below, so the southern tip of the States.
Mm-hmm.
But we'd slept in after another couple of drinks the night before. But then going around the hostel and all that, I was like, I'm going to just hire a car. Does anyone want to jump in with me? So I had about 2 or 3 people jump in the car with me,
cool.
which was pretty cool. So sort of all solo travellers, so still sort of keep in touch today.
Oh, lovely. Yeah, you don't get that if you're not travelling on your own, really. It's those kind of opportunities to just spontaneously say, oh, yeah, okay, I'll go with you. That's such a solo travel thing.
Yeah, that's right. I think, people like comfort in groups, and I understand that as well. But I think there's nothing like hitting the road by yourself, and you can sort of go whichever the way the wind blows. I guess that's the saying, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
But now we go together.
Yeah, but now we go together, and we love it.
Oh, absolutely. There's pros and cons of both, but perhaps in the future there will still be times when one or other of you just goes off for a solo trip for some reason, and yes, I think what you said, Jeremy, about how important it is for everyone to experience solo travel at some stage is so true, because you learn so much about yourself and about what you're capable of. That even if you're just traveling just in a couple or just with one other friend, it's just not the same. If you've got anyone there supporting you, it's just not the same as doing everything by yourself.
Yeah, and absolutely, and it doesn't have to be sort of halfway around the world. It could be 4-day trip, sort of just driving out into the countryside or something like that, sort of in your own country. I think it's definitely one of those things that sort of makes you sit back and sort of thinks, realizes who you are and what you actually drives you. Yeah,
very, very true. Really valuable stuff. I don't get a chance to travel solo that much, but every time I have, I've just got so much out of it. And later down the track when my son's older, I think I'll Well, I don't know. He always says he'll travel with me too, but I'm sure at some stage he'll decide that it's not so cool to travel with your mum everywhere.
Might get to that age, hey?
Maybe, yeah. Yeah, he's only 7, so I've still got time. But yeah, but it's such a great experience, and like lots of people are really scared. Were either of you worried? Particularly worried before you went?
Oh, absolutely. I think I was pooing myself, to put it in a nicer term. It's absolutely. I think it's the days leading up to it. Sort of hadn't realised how big of a deal it was going to be leaving home, and then I think the day, even the night of, it hadn't really fallen into place or sunk into place. But then the day of, sort of sat back and thought, oh, this is actually happening. What if this happens? What if my credit card doesn't work? What if my phone doesn't work, etc.? But I think the thing that you learn when you do it is that worst case scenario, you can apply for a new credit card, or you can buy a new SIM card over in the destination that you're going to, or if you forget your favourite pair of undies, you can just run down to the shop and get some new ones.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Oh, I know. I'm quite a worrier. I tend to get anxious before a trip, solo or not. But over the years, I have learnt to just completely shut down those worries. In the sort of, especially in the few days leading up to a trip, because there's zero point to worrying about them. Most of the things never ever happen, and like you say, there's always a solution. It's not like you're in the middle of outer space and there's nothing around.
No, that's right. As my old man always say, he said, control the controllables.
Oh, that's very wise. yes, very wise words. Control the controllables.
Yeah, Joe's cracking up next to me right now, but I think it's a good saying.
Oh, he really always says it.
Yeah.
But it's very true. It's very true. Jo, what about you before you took off to work in Thailand? Were you terrified or?
Yeah. So the time I went to Thailand by myself, and then I moved to London by myself as well. And honestly, both times were just terrible times in my life that I just wanted to leave Melbourne and get away from my own current life. There was both times reasons to just not be where I was. Right. And I was just desperate to get out, really. So I was just trying to find an escape. It was my escape route. I was seriously just running.
That's good though, because then you don't get so stressed.
Yeah. And so I wasn't nervous at all. I was so excited. I remember when I moved to London, I knew 1 or 2 people that would be in London, and it was so easy, just that transition of getting to London. All you needed to know was one person, and then you were just part of that group. There was a big expat community of Aussies over there, and you just needed one person to let you in, and they all kind of embraced you as family. I remember the first time I moved to London, it was my birthday a week later or something like that, and I was being really worried about not having anyone to celebrate with. But this one person I knew who actually wasn't in London, he was in Manchester. He said, look, I'm coming down for your birthday and I've got it sorted. I'm bringing people. You'll have people for your birthday. And so he came down and we went to Brick Lane, which is in eastern London. It's a place where all these different Indian restaurants are.
Yep.
Kind of like Lygon Street in Melbourne, if you know Lygon Street, but Indian restaurants. And we went there, and then he brought like 15 different people with him. And cool. For my birthday, and everyone was like, happy birthday, and buying me drinks. And I only knew one of these people. And by the end of the night, I just had 15 friends. And that's what it was like moving to London. They just embraced you as their own.
Because they've been there, done that too. So.
Yeah. And I guess being part of Thailand with a smaller community, it was exactly the same.
Yeah.
Because there was only so many of you. They just knew what it was like to be in that position.
Jo makes a really good point about solo travel, that if there's lots of other people on their own, then it's often actually much easier to make friends. It's similar to when I moved to Japan, and although I wasn't on my own there, but I quickly made so many other friends because everyone who was there knew what it was like to be new somewhere. So it's a friendly part of travel life, I guess. Now, my final guest today is Ian from the Barefoot Backpacker. So back in episode 68, I chatted with Ian about the pros and cons of solo travel, because it's something he does a lot. And in this part of our chat, Ian was telling me about his first big solo travel experience abroad.
I wrote a short story about this that was published by Brad Guides. Woohoo!
Yes.
They actually, it was, quite scary.
Cool.
My name in print. It's
but
really
well done, especially Brad. They're cool.
They are cool, and I chat to them a lot on Twitter. They're fab. But But yes, it was to Southeast Asia. It was about 5 years ago. And the way that all started was that I had so much time that I needed to book off from work, and my boss was going, you kind of need to go on holiday at some point.
True.
So I asked around my friends, and I said, right, you know me, I'm a weird introverted type, but I'm really interested in culture. I'm really interested in history. I want somewhere easy. I want somewhere cheap. I want somewhere that will fascinate me. Where shall I go? And every single one of them, I say every single one of them, I only asked about 4 people. Every single one of them said, go to Southeast Asia.
Huh.
Why go to Southeast Asia? Well, because it's obviously very historical. There have been people living there for a couple of thousand years. Mm-hmm. You've got whole temples, the culture, if you want beaches, you've got beaches, you've got old ruins, you've got the food. The food is fantastic.
Oh, yeah, yum.
And it's a good budget destination. And if you're going alone, it's a good backpacker's haunt because there's lots of other people doing it. Mm-hmm. So I went, okay, then let's look into this. So I took 3 weeks out and visited my step-cousin in Dubai for a couple of days, but mainly it was Cambodia and Laos. It was the 2 countries I chose.
Oh, cool.
Laos because it just seemed interesting and less visited, so I wanted somewhere slightly unusual. And Cambodia because I have this fascination with dark history.
Right, yeah. Good place then.
Absolutely. And it was fab. And again, in the run up to going there and in the run up to actually landing, I was going, oh my God, will I survive the first time away doing this properly? I'd been solo travel before, but not for a long time. It was an abortive attempt to Italy. So I was really sort of getting a bit nervous and anxious about arriving in. I flew into Kuala Lumpur. Will I be able to get out the airport? Will I? Blah, blah, blah. But it was great. It worked fine. Absolutely fine. I proved that I could do it.
Yes.
Which was a great bonus to me. The language wasn't a problem because no one over there expects you to be able to speak Lao or Khmer.
No. So everyone can get by. They're used to a bit of sign language. They know a bit of English. Yeah.
They have enough knowledge of English to be able to have a sensible conversation about, do you want to buy this trinket?
Yes, exactly. They have good sales language.
Absolutely. And it was really relaxed, and it wasn't stressful at all. I mean, you hear of some places in Southeast Asia, like sort of Bangkok and Vietnam, where it's a bit more intense, but certainly Cambodia and Laos weren't. And they were absolutely brilliant places to go for a first travel.
Yeah, so they gave you the confidence to do it again and again, and West Africa and everything.
Exactly, and I'm glad I went there first.
I agree with Ian that a Southeast Asian jaunt is probably a good way to do a first-time solo trip because there's lots of travellers around there, lots of solo travellers too, and it's probably pretty easy to find your feet. Anyway, that's all I've got for you today with our solo travel adventures, and I will let you know where to find some of our guests. So first up, we had Jo Castro from Lifestyle 50 at lifestyle50.com, and her travel blog is Zigazag at zigazag.com. And after Jo, we had another Jo and Jeremy, and Jo and Jeremy Duggan are from the website Coming Home Strong. Logically, you can find them at cominghomestrong.com. They've got lots of great adventures there, and we'll talk to them later about some of their other kind of physically challenging adventures they've had as well. And finally, I had Ian on again from the Barefoot Backpacker. He's always got lots of good stories to tell, and you can find him at barefoot-backpacker.com or on Instagram at barefoot_backpacker. Come along and join our Facebook group at Thoughtful Travellers and tell us more about your solo trip experiences, or ask if you're worried about travelling solo. There'll be people who chime in and tell you why it's okay. Catch me on Twitter at Amanda Kendall using the hashtag ThoughtfulTravelPod. And all of this and more will be in the show notes, which are today at notaballerina.com/74. Thanks so much for listening. This has been another episode of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Show notes and other information are at notaballerina.com/podcast. Join me again soon for another chat about why we travel. Bye for now.